Hello and welcome to our webinar on English Teaching Cascade. And today's webinar is on teaching process-based reading. You know that reading is a crucial skill, given that it's a receptive skill. This gives our students the opportunity to maximize their vocabulary, introduce them to the correct use of the English structures, different patterns of punctuation and spelling. So this tells us something about making the most of the reading texts that we have in our textbooks. That's why our students need to know how to read the texts and how to make use of the vocabulary, the structures, and the patterns of the texts that they have to read in the textbooks. Therefore, in this webinar, I'll be shedding light on the skills of reading that students need to know in order to be able to find a purpose or a clue to reading the text that they study. Then I'll move on to the reading strategies or the tools that our students need to know in order to go smoothly throughout the text. Afterwards, I'll be introducing the reading processes, how teachers approach the reading text. And afterwards, the reading stages or the sequence of reading, the sequence through which we as teachers have to go in order to teach reading. And finally, I'll be sharing some activities that you can adapt and use at each stage. Okay, so if we start with this text, this is a model text, reading text from grade 5, Connect Plus. So if you just have a look at the structure or the layout of the page, it starts with a title, and then we have a question. Afterwards, we have the text, and after the text, we have a follow-up question. So if in the classroom, we just follow that order or that sequence that we pose the question, ask the students to read the text word by word, and after reading the whole text, they just complete the close that follows. This is the traditional model of reading a text. So students don't benefit much of that model because that sequence just fits the lower thinking skills, which is remembering. So this is one thing. Another thing, it does not cover or it does not respond to all learning styles. Some students are not interested in that way or do not understand in that way. So we need to change our mindsets a little bit. And we need to know some techniques and strategies to help students make the best of or make the most of the reading texts. So we need to apply a process-based reading instruction so that we develop the 21st century skills and the higher order thinking skills in our students. And this can happen by a series or an array of things, one of which is teaching them the reading skills. So the reading skills are the purposes of why students read a text. So we have to determine whether we need our students to read the text very quickly in order to know the gist or the main idea, so that they need the skill of skimming, or we need them to read the text very quickly in order to find specific answers to certain questions, so they need the skill of scanning, or we need them to go beyond those specific answers, and we want them to go into the details to make conclusions and make inferences out of what is stated or what is stated in the text. So it depends on the purpose why the student has to read a certain text. Okay, but if we just tell the students to read the whole text word by word to answer a given question, so what is the purpose? The purpose is not clear. Okay, the job or the task is arduous to read a whole text to find an answer to just a question. Okay, so skimming again means to read the text very quickly, to look at the pictures, the captions, the title, read the first lines of paragraphs so that students can come up with the main idea. Okay, scanning, again, reading the text very quickly. They don't have to read word by word, or they don't have to read everything. They have to follow keywords or clues in a specific question to find a specific piece of information. But in the detailed reading, students have to go through the details and the supporting ideas or statements in each paragraph. Okay. Moving to the reading strategies. And the reading strategies are tools that we teach our students to help them reflect and construct their understanding and comprehension of the text. So how can we do that in an engaging and interactive way? So we can ask our students to predict or make some predictions about the text. And this happens by asking them questions. What is going to happen? What are your expectations about the things related to the topic that the text may be talking about? So this may be conducted at the very beginning. And another interesting strategy is visualize. And that strategy is fabulous and effective because it activates students' imagination. It also emphasizes the 21st century skill of creativity and collaboration and also cooperation. So ideas to help your students to apply that strategy is to ask them to represent their understanding of the text by turning the information introduced in the text in the form of an artwork. And this can be, for example, in drawings, visual notes, collage, even mimes. So they may represent the meaning in signs. Okay, so it's interesting to help students represent their understanding and comprehension. Another strategy is connect. So also we need to teach our students how to reflect their understanding of the relationship between what is stated in the text and their own experience or the real world. So you may provide them with sentence stems like, I saw this before, when, and then he or she elaborates on similar experiences he or she went through in their lives. This is similar to, or this is different from. So it's very important to make connections because you know that reading is not limited to language. Students also need the reading skills and strategies to help them study the subjects that are English-based. One more strategy is questions. Students can ask questions while reading. Why, when, what, where. So in order to get into the details and come up with the most of the content introduced in the text. Clarify is a marvelous strategy. And there is another word for clarify here, which is annotation. So students can annotate and highlight using, circles, underline, or even colors in order to, in order to emphasize the important information or the key ideas introduced in the text. Finally, they can also use evaluate, the strategy of evaluation, to make judgments on the story, the events, the characters, the behaviors and the actions of the characters or the stakeholders involved in the text. So all of those tools can help students understand the text in a fun and engaging way. Moving to the reading processes, and this has to do with teachers, how to approach the reading text. So whether you approach it top down or bottom up, and top down means that I start from discussing the ideas. So I make a discussion about the topic to activate my students' knowledge of the topic. So I start with discussing ideas or content and then go down into the language aspects and the structure of the text, the vocabulary, and so on. This is one approach. Another approach or process is bottom up. And this usually happens if I want to use a reading text as a sort of practice or a tool of practicing language structures and language aspects. So I bring a reading text and ask my students to highlight key vocabulary structures or aspects related to what we studied. So a good model for the bottom-up reading is this text. If you have a look at the prompt, underline the past simple verbs in the text, mark the regular and the irregular verbs. So it's very clear that here the purpose of reading the text is to highlight structures in language aspects. Okay, so the teacher starts with those language aspects, the students highlight those features, and then we can move on to the vocabulary, highlighting the key vocabulary by introducing pictures, asking students to guess the meaning from the context, moving on to the picture, and asking elicitation questions in order to activate my students' schemata or background knowledge. Like, for example, what do you see in the picture? How many? Where are they? Okay, and what happens there? What do you know about forest life? What do you know about monkeys? And so on. So you are moving from the textual features, the language and the grammar and vocabulary to the ideas and concepts. So this is the bottom-up approach. So if we move on to the sequence, how, as a teacher, you teach reading. So if we move if we consider the example that we provided at the very beginning, that the teacher provides students the text as a whole. So the students have to read the whole text word by word and then answer questions. This is not process writing. This is not process reading. But in order to make it simple, you have to break the process into manageable chunks so that you make the mental processes easier for your students. So we have before or pre-reading, while or during reading, and after or post-reading. There are things that we have to do before the reading process, and then we have activities and things that we have to do during reading, and also things that our students have to do after reading. So we are breaking the whole process into manageable pieces. Let's see how we combine the strategies or the tools of reading and the stages. So what tools and strategies our students can use at each stage? So if we start with the before reading or the pre-reading, before they read, we need to create and build interest in the topic. I need to pay my students attention to the topic and make them willing to proceed reading. And how do we do that? So we activate our students' schemata, and schemata means that the information that we learn from the world is ordered in our minds in the form of chunks. And those chunks are called schemata. And as human beings, we tend to understand or learn the new information in terms of the old ones. So in order to help my students learn or understand the new texts I provide to them in the classroom, I need to activate the information that they already know about the topic. And this happens by asking them questions about the title, the pictures, any captions provided. Also, I need to guide my students to read the first sentences of each paragraph to have some idea of the main idea of the text. to help them make predictions about the text content and to clarify any vocabulary students may come across in the text. And for teaching vocabulary, you may bring pictures, you may bring realia, use games or mime definitions in order to help them understand the vocabulary. All this happens before the actual reading. So what should we do in the during reading process or in the during reading stage? So in the during reading stage, I need my students to reflect their understanding of the content of the text. And this may happen in several ways. So one way or one strategy, as we illustrated before, is to help students visualize, to turn the information in the text into something that we can see. This may happen in several ways, as we said before. So they can use drawing, graphics to represent the information presented in the text. They can use any semiotic symbols like mime, any form of art like origami, sculpture, collage, graphics, etc. And you can Google any of these forms, how they are used in reading. You'll find interesting activities based on art. Also, at the during stage, students can check their predictions or the predictions they made at the very beginning at the before reading stage, whether they are correct or they are different. Students can use the strategy or the technique of think aloud. And here you may provide them with a paper slip with some sentence systems, like, for example, I came across that word before. That word is unfamiliar. I knew this before. I met that situation before. Okay, what do we mean by? So this is thinking aloud. Students try to make their thinking concrete on the paper or on the page. You may provide your students with graphic organizers in order to come up with the main ideas, for example, or the main pieces of information. And there are lots of graphic organizers available on Google Images and Pinterest. You can check some. Also, students can annotate and take notes. So you can provide them post-it notes so that they can take notes of the most important information and write them down while reading. Also, they can annotate, they can circle important words, the words that are unfamiliar. They can underline or even highlight using colors. So all of these strategies and techniques are indispensable and invaluable for students to reflect their understanding in the during stage. And remember that in the during stage, we may use several skills of reading. We can use scanning, and we can use reading for detail. In the after or at the after reading stage, we need to go beyond reflecting understanding. We need to go deeper into the details. So we may ask students to paraphrase the text. Paraphrase means to express the text in different language, in their own words. This is a kind of activation of the language they have to find details and make connections between concepts, make inferences, and inferences to go beyond what is stated, to summarize the text, to focus only on the main ideas, and to analyze information, the qualities and the features and the characteristics of certain concepts stated in the text. So this is how the stages and the strategies or the tools of reading go together. Okay, let's move on to the activities that we can do or use at each stage. There are several activities that you can conduct at the pre-reading stage. So remember that at the pre-reading stage, I activate my students as Chimera, ask them questions about the title, the pictures, the captions, in order to build interest in the text and pay their attention. And at the same time, I try to activate their background knowledge, and there are several activities. One of which is the KWL, is to use a KWL chart, which is what I know, what I want to know, and what I have learned. And in this chart, students state what they know about the topic, what they want or wish to know about the topic, and after they finish reading, they state what they've learned. So they make a connection here between what they already know and what they knew from the text. And I would like to share with you, some other activities. So while reading, there are multiple and a ton of activities that you can use. And the most interesting of which is using visual notes and using art or graphics. So you can find multiple forms of visual notes on Google Images. So I'll be sharing with you some models that you can adapt to your students. Okay, so if you just type visual notes on Google Images, you'll be given all of those models and patterns. They are wonderful. So you can bring as many as you can and show to your students. You teach them those patterns, and you tell them that they can use any of those notes in order to represent their understanding of the text they are reading. So it's interesting. And after they finish their representation, this happens in the while reading. After finishing their representation of the text, in the post-reading, they can post those posters and start presenting their work. Okay, so back to our PPT. Okay. Another while reading activity is the classify and categorize, or the classification, categorization, and listing tasks. These are, again, invaluable tasks that you can adapt to your reading classes. So here again, you can use organizers, sheets, or worksheets on which students can read, and while reading, they have to categorize things that you wear, things that you do not wear, things, living things and non-living things, healthy food and non-healthy food. So the classification and categorization tasks help students to emphasize their understanding of a text. In the post-reading stage, you can use more advanced activities or tasks. So, for example, you may ask students to change the genre of the text. So, for example, if your text is, or if your reading text is an article, you may ask your students to change it into a conversation and then practice the conversation. So here you integrated multiple skills together: reading, speaking, and writing. And also the 21st century skills, cooperation and collaboration. You can ask them to change the article into a song, and for advanced students, you may ask them to turn the article into a poem, for example. And also you can ask them to turn the article into a letter, or respond to the article in the form of a letter. So all of these are just ideas. You can find a ton of them if you Google post-reading activities. Post-reading activities, if you remember, as we said, that in the during or at the during stage, you ask your students to visualize and represent the information in an art form using visual notes, using collage, origami, any art form, even use sculptures, And after they finish at the post-reading stage, they start, they start presenting their work and then exchange places in order to comment on each other's work. So this is interesting, and they help them to make the most of what they read and to make use of the language they learned. Okay, so other activities that you can use the post-reading stage. You can conduct debates, so you can divide your classroom into 2 teams, and each team takes a position for or against, and each team has to argue for their position, and then the debate goes on. This is, again, helps students to make use of the language knowledge and maximize their language learning proficiency. Other ideas include the dictogloss. And the activity of dictogloss is a kind of dictation that you have a short text, and dictate it to the class. While you are reading the text, the students take notes individually, and after that, they sit together in groups and they try to reconstruct the text. So instead of bringing a text for that purpose of dictogloss as an activity, you can make use of the reading texts that you already taught to your students and use that activity. So you are maximizing and increasing the impact of the reading text. So we talked about summarizing, and summarizing, again, you help your students to come up with the main ideas or the key points presented in the text. And it's a very important skill for making sure that students understood the reading text. And again, to make the activity fun and gradual, for example, you don't provide them the reading text and ask them to summarize it and write a summary of the text. You have to make it gradual or break the task into digestible chunks so that students can do it. So if you go, for example, this is, here I have a model here. So this is a sheet for the summary activity. Here we have a kind of a diagram where we have a lot of WH words, so students state from the text who are the people, the characters involved, depending on the type of the text, what, the events, activities, what happened, why, stating the reasons for those happenings, where, the places for those happenings, and when, the timing for each happening. And afterwards, or after that stage, students have to combine or compose their answers to write the summary. So you broke down the process or the activity of summarization into 2 chunks, 2 manageable chunks, to make it easy for your students. And for other formats, you can find hundreds of formats on Google Images, and you can create yours on Canva. So I'll be sharing with you some examples. So for example, if you go to Google Images and type reading summary blank, so all of these are types of diagrams for summaries. So you can download or save them to your PCs and print them and use them in your own classrooms. Okay, so back to the PPT. Okay, another activity that you can use in the post-reading or at the post-reading process is tape recording. And here you are integrating the reading skill and the speaking. So I'm trying to make the most of the text, as I said before, that try to make the most use of the text. So tape recording means that students have to read the text very well, check the pronunciation of the words, and after that, record the text in a reading aloud format. So you may read the text aloud several times for them so that they know the pronunciation of the words. For older students, you may ask them to check the pronunciation of the words and then record. For the younger ones, you may provide a recording of the text and then they have to listen to it and then record it. Okay. Another activity that you can conduct is hexagonal thinking. And you know, the main purpose of the hexagonal thinking activity is that you can use it in your own classroom as a speaking activity to activate speaking or to encourage students to speak. So you may use this activity as a post-reading activity. So you bring hexagons, state the key concepts discussed in the text, and then you divide your students into groups and ask each group to discuss the connections between the concepts. Okay, so again, to maximize understanding. Or another variety or another variant of the activity, you ask students to write down the main concepts discussed in the reading texts. And after coming up with the main concepts, they have to discuss the connections or to make connections between those concepts. And after finishing that, they share their ideas with the other groups. So it's interesting and it helps you make the most of the reading text. You may also make use of games. Games are fun for any age group and for any language level. So you can search for games. You can Google games. They are available. And you can also check American English for Educators and americanenglish.state.gov. You'll find many. You'll find many games and many resources. So as just examples that I'll be sharing with you, you can create board games based on, for example, you can write concepts, you can write questions, you can write sentence stems based on the information discussed in the texts, and ask your students to roll a dice and answer the questions. One asks and the other person answers. You can also ask your students to act it out. So after reading the texts, they start acting the information or the scenario. They create a scenario of the text and act it out. This is, again, a good activity that they can use after the reading to reflect their understanding. Another activity is the speaking cards. You can create speaking cards, and this is a combination of pictures and questions. So students are divided into pairs. Open the box is another activity. You can make use of colored papers, cardboard, paper as boxes, to create boxes on the walls, for example, and behind each cardboard, there is a question or there is an action that students have to do based on the information provided in the reading text. So all of these are just ideas. There are lots of them available on YouTube and Google. Just Google any of these titles, post-reading activities, pre-reading activities, or while reading activities, and you'll find many. So to recap what we discussed in this webinar, we started highlighting the importance of the reading skill in the classroom, and it does not have to be traditionally done as reading the whole text and answering questions that follow. That we need, the purpose of reading is to help students understand, to help students help others, because you know, we use reading in the real world, reading menus, instructions, prescriptions, and other types of texts. So reading is important. So we need to maximize the potential and benefit of reading by teaching students why they have to read a specific text, by teaching them the reading skills, skimming, scanning, or detail. Also, we need to teach them these strategies that will help them read the text smoothly in order to reflect their understanding. Also, we need to understand what process or approach we have to use to approach the text, and this depends on our objectives and purpose. Whether we use the reading text to practice language, so we'll be approaching the text bottom up from the language features up to the ideas and concepts, or we'd like to do the other way around, to start with discussing the ideas and concepts and then go down to the textual and language features. Then we started moving through the stages or the sequence through which we have to teach reading. You know that reading entails several mental processes, okay? Because we have a lot of chunks of information provided in the text. So students cannot understand all of that at once. We have to break that big process into smaller cognitive processes. And this happens through the stages or the stages of the process of reading. After that, we combined the strategies and the stages. What strategies to be used at each stage? And what activities to be used at each stage. So my recommendation is that check further activities and try to apply them in your classrooms so that your students can benefit the most. And finally, these are the references that I based the content of my presentation on. You may check them for further information.